The tension at Sunday dinner had been building for months, but tonight felt different. My brother Marcus was particularly aggressive, his voice carrying that familiar edge that meant he'd been drinking before arriving at Mom and Dad's house. "Sarah, you need to get your priorities straight," he continued, pointing his fork at me across the mahogany dining table that had hosted these same arguments for years. "While you're out there playing Mother Teresa with homeless people and drug addicts, your own family is struggling." Dad nodded approvingly from the head of the table. "Your brother's right. This foundation volunteer work of yours is getting out of hand. 3 nights a week at soup kitchens, weekends at shelters, board meetings every Tuesday. When was the last time you helped us with anything?" I kept eating my meatloaf, letting the familiar criticism wash over me. At 29, I'd learned that defending my charitable work only made these dinners worse. My family had never understood why I spent so much time with what they called other people's problems. "Remember when I needed help moving last month?" Marcus pressed on. "You were at some charity gala instead of helping your own brother. Family comes first, Sarah. Always." Mom set down her water glass with that disappointed sigh I'd been hearing since childhood. "Sweetheart, we're not saying charity is bad, but you're neglecting your real life. Your career, your relationships, your family obligations. This obsession with helping strangers is becoming unhealthy." My sister Jennifer, always eager to pile on when I was the target, leaned forward conspiratorially. "Honestly, Sarah, it's starting to look like you're running away from your own life. Like you're trying to feel important by inserting yourself into other people's tragedies." The words stung because they contained just enough truth to hurt. My family had always seen me as the soft one, the bleeding heart who couldn't handle real-world success. While Marcus ran his construction company, Jennifer climbed the corporate ladder at a marketing firm, and my younger brother David finished his MBA. I spent my days coordinating food drives and grant applications. "What kind of career prospects do you think this volunteer coordinator position offers?" Dad asked, cutting into his meat with surgical precision. "You're 30 next year, Sarah. It's time to think about building something for yourself." Marcus laughed bitterly. "She makes like $35,000 a year coordinating charity events. Meanwhile, I'm pulling in 6 figures running actual businesses that employ real people and contribute to the economy." "At least Jennifer's marketing job has growth potential," Mom added. "But this nonprofit sector, it's just not sustainable, honey. You can't build a real life on good intentions." I finished chewing and swallowed carefully before responding. "I understand your concerns about my financial stability." "It's not just financial," Jennifer interrupted. "It's about priorities. Last Christmas, you spent Christmas morning serving breakfast at a homeless shelter instead of being here for family gift exchange. That hurt Mom's feelings." Mom nodded sadly. "It did hurt. I understand wanting to help people, but your family should come first. We've been in your life for 29 years. These strangers you help? They'll forget you the moment you stop showing up." David, who'd been quiet until now, decided to join the intervention. "Sarah, I'm about to graduate with my MBA, and I can tell you from a business perspective, your resume looks like someone who can't commit to serious career growth. All these volunteer positions, part-time nonprofit work, foundation board memberships that probably don't even pay. It looks unfocused." The criticism felt rehearsed, like they'd discussed my failures before I arrived. This wasn't just a spontaneous dinner conversation. This was a coordinated family effort to get me to abandon the work that gave my life meaning. "We're worried about you," Dad said, adopting his stern but caring voice. "This savior complex you've developed isn't healthy. You can't fix everyone's problems, and trying to do so is preventing you from fixing your own." Marcus slammed his beer bottle on the table. "Exactly. While you're out there giving away your time and energy to people who don't even know your name, your own family is watching you waste your potential. It's selfish, actually." "Selfish?" I asked quietly. "Yes, selfish," Jennifer confirmed. "You get to feel good about yourself helping strangers while ignoring your responsibilities to the people who actually love you. It's self-indulgent charity work that makes you feel important without requiring any real sacrifice or commitment." The conversation continued for another hour, each family member taking turns explaining why my dedication to charitable work was actually a character flaw masquerading as virtue. They painted a picture of someone using volunteer work as an excuse to avoid real adult responsibilities. As I drove home to my modest apartment, their words echoed in my mind. Maybe they were right about some things. Maybe I was avoiding certain aspects of adult life. But the work I did mattered to people who had nowhere else to turn. The next 3 weeks passed in relative peace. I continued my regular schedule. Tuesday foundation board meetings, Thursday evening at the food bank, weekend shifts at the family shelter. The work felt even more meaningful after my family's dismissal, like I was proving something to myself if not to them. Then Marcus called on a Wednesday afternoon, his voice tight with panic. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about something serious. Can you meet me for coffee?" We met at the diner near his construction office, where he looked older than his 32 years. Dark circles under his eyes, hands shaking slightly as he stirred sugar into his coffee. "My business is in trouble," he admitted without preamble. "Bad trouble. I took on 3 major commercial projects last year, and the biggest client just declared bankruptcy. They owe me $400,000 that I'll never see." I listened without interrupting as he explained the cascading financial disaster. The unpaid invoices, the equipment loans he couldn't service, the payroll he couldn't meet for 18 employees who depended on him. "I've got maybe 6 weeks before I have to declare bankruptcy," he said, staring at his coffee cup. "I've already mortgaged the house twice. Jennifer and David have been helping with personal expenses, but this is beyond family loans." He looked up at me with desperate eyes. "I heard you know people in the business community through your foundation work. Do you think any of them might be interested in partnerships or emergency business loans? I know we haven't been supportive of your volunteer work, but I'm hoping maybe some of your connections could point me in the right direction." I felt a strange calm settle over me as I processed his request. "What kind of business loan are you thinking about?" "I need at least $600,000 to cover immediate debts and keep operations running while I rebuild the client base. Maybe more for a safety cushion. I've been to every bank in town, but with the outstanding loans and pending lawsuits, they won't touch me." Marcus had never asked me for help with anything significant. In his eyes, I was the family failure who wasted time on meaningless charity work instead of building real wealth or career success. "Let me see what I can do," I told him. "I'll make some calls." His relief was visible. "Thank you, Sarah. I know I've been critical of your work, but maybe those nonprofit connections will finally pay off for something important." Over the following weeks, the family crisis deepened. Jennifer called to update me on Marcus's situation, and then revealed her own financial troubles. The marketing firm had laid off half their staff, including her, just 2 months before her wedding. "The wedding venue alone is $40,000 and we've already put down 20, she explained during our phone call. "My fiancé's family is expecting this big celebration, but without my income, I don't know how we'll manage the remaining payments." David, despite his MBA confidence, called the next week. "Sarah, I know this is awkward, but I've been thinking about starting a consulting business after graduation. Do you think any of your foundation contacts might need business consulting services? I'm trying to line up clients before I officially launch." Even Mom and Dad reached out. Dad's small accounting practice was struggling to compete with larger firms, and they were considering selling their house to downsize, but the real estate market was terrible. "We were wondering," Mom said carefully during our phone conversation, "if any of those charity organizations you work with might need accounting services. Your father could offer nonprofit rates." For the first time in years, my family was asking for my help. Not my emotional support or my presence at dinners, but my professional connections and expertise in a sector they'd spent years dismissing as irrelevant to real success. I told each of them I would see what I could do, and I meant it. Despite their years of criticism, they were still my family. The calls I needed to make weren't to the volunteers and nonprofit workers my family imagined formed my professional network. Instead, I walked into the downtown office building that housed the Hartwell Foundation, took the executive elevator to the 42nd floor, and sat down at the mahogany desk where I spent most of my days. The nameplate read, "Sarah Chin, Executive Director and Trust Administrator." My assistant, Margaret, knocked on the door at 3 o'clock. "The emergency business loan applications you requested are ready for review," she said, placing a stack of files on my desk. I opened the first folder and saw Marcus's application. His construction company was requesting a $750,000 emergency business loan from the Hartwell Foundation's Small Business Crisis Relief Program. The application was thorough, desperate, and honest about the dire circumstances. The second folder contained Jennifer's application for wedding and living expenses emergency assistance through our individual crisis support program. She was asking for $45,000 to cover immediate financial needs during unemployment. The third folder held David's application for our Emerging Entrepreneur Mentorship and Funding Initiative, requesting $100,000 in startup capital and business development resources. The fourth contained my parents' application for our Senior Small Business Support Program, asking for marketing assistance and client development resources for Dad's accounting practice. I opened my laptop and reviewed the Hartwell Foundation's current financial position. The trust one administered, established by my grandmother 15 years ago and grown through careful investment and management, now held assets worth $1.8 billion. The foundation distributed approximately $90 million annually to various charitable causes, business development programs and crisis relief initiatives. I was not just the executive director. I was the primary trust administrator with full decision-making authority over fund distribution. My family had no idea that their volunteer coordinator daughter actually controlled one of the largest private charitable foundations in the region. Margaret brought in the afternoon mail, including a letter from the State Foundation Registry congratulating us on being named Philanthropic Organization of the Year for the third consecutive time. Forbes had called twice requesting interviews about innovative charitable funding models. I reviewed each family member's application with the same professional standards I applied to all requests. Marcus's business had poor financial management and high debt-to-asset ratios, making it a risky investment for foundation funds. Jennifer's request was for personal expenses rather than charitable or community development purposes, which fell outside our funding guidelines. David's startup idea lacked the social impact component required for our entrepreneurship program. My parents' accounting practice served primarily affluent individual clients rather than nonprofit organizations or underserved communities. None of their applications met the foundation's established criteria for funding approval. I had created these criteria myself, based on 15 years of learning how to deploy charitable resources for maximum community impact. Personal financial crises, business failures due to poor planning, wedding expenses, and traditional business development fell outside our mission of addressing systemic poverty, supporting innovative social programs, and building sustainable community resources. My phone rang at 4:30. Marcus calling for an update on my inquiries about business loan possibilities. Sarah, have you heard anything from your foundation contacts? I'm running out of time here and my lawyer says bankruptcy might be the only option if I can't find emergency funding soon. I looked at his application on my desk, then at the framed photo of last year's food bank expansion project that had fed 12,000 additional families. Marcus had never asked about that project, never shown interest in the housing development for homeless veterans, never inquired about the scholarship program that had sent 43 low-income students to college. I'm still reviewing options, I told him honestly. Any sense of timeline? Because I've got 18 employees who might lose their jobs if I can't make payroll next month. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus had built his identity around being the successful family member, the one with the real job, that contributed to the economy and employed other people. Now he needed help from the sister whose fake job, at a foundation he'd never bothered to learn about. Jennifer called that evening. Sarah, I know you're trying to help, but time is really running out on the wedding venue deposit. If we lose that, we lose everything we've already paid. David sent a text. Any updates on potential consulting clients? My graduation is next month and I really need to hit the ground running. Mom called after dinner. Your father is so stressed about the business. If you think any of your charity connections might be interested in accounting services, even small projects would help. I scheduled individual meetings with each of them for the following week, asking them to come to my office to discuss the possibilities I'd been researching. None of them asked where my office was located or what organization I worked for. They assumed I was arranging meetings at the community center where they thought I volunteered. Marcus arrived first on Tuesday at 10 o'clock. The building directory in the lobby listed the Hartwell Foundation as occupying floors 40 through 42, but he took the elevator I directed him to without reading the listings. When he walked into my office, his expression shifted from hopeful to confused. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the downtown business district. Original artwork lined the walls. My mahogany desk was larger than most dining tables, and the conference area could seat 12 people comfortably. "This is not what I expected," he said, looking around at the office that clearly belonged to a senior executive rather than a volunteer coordinator. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the chairs across from my desk. "I've reviewed your business loan application." "Pie what?" I opened the folder containing his paperwork. "Your application to the Hartwell Foundation for Emergency Business Funding. You submitted it through our online portal 3 weeks ago." Marcus stared at the documents, recognition dawning slowly. "This is the foundation where you work?" "I'm the executive director and trust administrator," I explained calmly. "The Hartwell Foundation manages $1.8 billion in charitable assets and distributes approximately $90 million annually to qualifying programs and organizations." He looked from the papers to my face to the expansive office, trying to process this information. "You run this place?" "I've been the executive director for 8 years. My grandmother established the foundation, and I've been involved with its operations since college." Marcus sat back in his chair, the reality sinking in. "When you said you'd make some calls about business loans, I was reviewing your application through our standard evaluation process, the same process we use for all funding requests. And I handed him the assessment summary. Your application doesn't meet our criteria for business crisis relief funding. The foundation focuses on supporting organizations and enterprises that demonstrate strong financial management, community impact, and sustainable business models. Your construction company's debt-to-asset ratio and management history don't align with our investment guidelines." The color drained from his face as he read the denial letter. "Sarah, you don't understand. I need this money or I'm going to lose everything." "I understand completely. That's why I wanted to meet with you in person rather than just sending the standard rejection letter." Marcus looked around the office again as if seeing it for the first time. "All those years we told you to get a real job and you were running $1 billion foundation. Nearly $2 billion now, yes. Why didn't you ever tell us?" I considered the question carefully. "When would have been the right time? During Sunday dinners when you explained why my work was meaningless? During family gatherings when you dismissed foundation board meetings as fake jobs? When you told me I was wasting time helping strangers who would never appreciate my efforts?" He had no answer for that. Jennifer arrived for her Wednesday meeting with similar expectations. She'd assumed I was arranging for her to meet with potential employers or emergency assistance coordinators. When she saw my office, her confusion mirrored Marcus's. "Sarah, what is this place?" I explained the foundation, my role, and her application status. Her wedding expense emergency request had also been denied for falling outside our charitable mission guidelines. "But you could make an exception," she said. "You're the director." "I could, but I won't. The foundation's resources are designated for charitable purposes that serve underserved populations and create lasting community impact. Wedding expenses don't qualify." Jennifer's shock gave way to anger. "So you'll help complete strangers but not your own sister?" "I help people who meet our criteria for assistance regardless of their relationship to me. The foundation has funded over 200 small businesses in the past 5 years, but only those that demonstrate community benefit and sustainable financial planning." "This is insane," Jennifer said. "You've been pretending to be some struggling volunteer while actually controlling billions of dollars?" "I've never pretended anything. You assumed my work was unimportant without ever asking what I actually did." David's Thursday meeting followed the same pattern. His startup consulting business application was denied for lacking the social impact component required for our entrepreneurship program funding. "You could fund my business," he argued. "Then I could hire employees and contribute to the economy. That's social impact. Our entrepreneurship program specifically supports businesses that address underserved market needs or provide essential services to disadvantaged populations. Traditional business consulting doesn't meet those criteria." "But I'm your brother." "Which is exactly why I have to hold your application to the same standards as everyone else's. Any appearance of favoritism would compromise the foundation's integrity and my professional ethics." My parents arrived together for Friday's meeting, both dressed in their best business attire to make a good impression on the foundation contacts they thought I had arranged for them to meet. When they realized I was the foundation executive they'd come to see, Mom actually gasped audibly. Sarah, honey, you work here? I run the foundation, Mom. Have for 8 years. Dad looked at the financial documents I presented. Your organization has nearly $2 billion in assets? $1.8 billion as of the most recent quarterly report, yes. They sat in stunned silence as I explained that their application for small business support had been evaluated and declined. Dad's accounting practice served affluent individual clients rather than nonprofit organizations or low-income individuals, which placed it outside our mission focus. All these years, Mom said quietly, we thought you were just volunteering at soup kitchens and homeless shelters. I do volunteer at soup kitchens and homeless shelters. I also administrate foundation grants that fund soup kitchens and homeless shelters throughout the region. The foundation has distributed $8.4 million to food security programs in the past 3 years alone. Why didn't you tell us? Dad asked. I looked at both of my parents across the mahogany conference table. Because every time I tried to talk about my work, you told me it was meaningless. Every foundation board meeting I attended was dismissed as a fake job. Every charitable project I coordinated was described as playing pretend philanthropist. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We didn't know. You didn't ask. In 15 years of doing this work, not one family member ever asked what specific organizations I worked with, what my actual job responsibilities were, or why I was passionate about charitable work. You assumed it was all unpaid volunteering because that fit your narrative about my life choices. Dad stared at the grant distribution reports I'd spread across the table. The Hartwell Foundation. I've seen this name in the newspaper. You fund the new community health center. We provided the primary funding, yes. Along with the housing development for homeless veterans, the job training program at the community college, and the small business incubator in the economic development district. And you've been doing this work the whole time we've been telling you to get a real job? Yes. The following week brought a series of difficult phone calls from my family members. Marcus called first, his voice hollow with defeat. Sarah, I had to file for bankruptcy yesterday. The lawyers said there was no other option. I'm going to lose the business, probably the house too. I listened without comment as he described meeting with his employees to explain the layoffs, the equipment being repossessed, the years of work dissolving into legal proceedings. I keep thinking about what you said, he continued. About how I never asked what you actually did for work. I was so arrogant, assuming I knew better about success and career building. Jennifer called to report that she'd lost the wedding venue deposit and was planning a much smaller ceremony. My fiancé's family thinks I'm a financial disaster, she said. They're not wrong. David graduated without the startup capital he'd counted on. I'm moving back in with Mom and Dad while I look for a regular job, he admitted. Turns out an MBA doesn't guarantee anything. Mom called to say they were listing the house for sale. Your father's practice isn't generating enough income to maintain the mortgage payments. We're looking at apartments now. During each conversation, I offered emotional support but no financial assistance. The foundation's mission remained clear: serving underserved populations and creating sustainable community impact, not solving personal financial crises created by poor planning and bad luck. But I did make one exception to my policy of separating personal and professional relationships. I arranged for Marcus to meet with the director of our small business development program, not for funding but for the job training and placement services we provided to entrepreneurs recovering from business failures. The program had a 78% success rate in helping former business owners transition to sustainable employment. I connected Jennifer with the career development coordinator at our adult education center, which provided job placement assistance and professional development resources for people rebuilding their careers after major life changes. I introduced David to the management team at our community investment initiative, which was always looking for qualified business graduates to help administer small business development programs. I referred my parents to the senior services coordinator who managed our programs for older adults transitioning to fixed incomes, including financial planning resources and affordable housing assistance. None of these interventions involved foundation funding for my family members' personal situations, but all connected them with legitimate resources that could help them rebuild from their current difficulties. The services I offered them were the same ones I'd been developing and expanding for years, designed to help people recover from financial setbacks and build sustainable paths forward. The same programs my family had dismissed as meaningless volunteer work while I was designing and implementing them. 3 months later, Marcus found stable employment as a project manager with a larger construction firm. The job paid less than his failed business had generated during good years, but provided steady income and health insurance for his family. Jennifer completed a certification program in digital marketing and found a position with a nonprofit organization that paid modest but reliable wages. Her wedding was smaller than originally planned but still meaningful. David was hired as a program coordinator for our small business development initiative, where his MBA training proved valuable for helping other entrepreneurs develop sustainable business plans. My parents downsized to a retirement community and Dad began providing accounting services to local nonprofit organizations, which generated less income than his previous practice but offered more regular hours and less stress. None of them had gotten the financial rescue they'd hoped for, but all had accessed resources that helped them build more stable situations from their current circumstances. During Thanksgiving dinner that year, the family dynamics were different. We met at Jennifer's apartment instead of my parents' house, around a smaller table with a more modest meal. "I want to say something," Marcus announced as we sat down to eat. "I owe Sarah an apology. We all do." He looked around the table at each family member before continuing. "For years, we dismissed her work as meaningless volunteer activities while she was actually running one of the most important charitable organizations in the region. We were ignorant and arrogant." Jennifer nodded in agreement. "I keep thinking about all the times we told you to focus on real success while you were literally distributing millions of dollars to help people build better lives. The job you helped me get," David added, "has taught me more about business and community development than my entire MBA program did. I'm working with entrepreneurs who are creating jobs and solving real problems, not just maximizing profit margins." Dad cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have been talking about this a lot. We realize we never really listened when you tried to tell us about your work. We heard foundation and volunteers, and assumed we knew what that meant." Mom dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished, honey. I just wish it hadn't taken our own crisis for us to understand how important your work really is." I looked around the table at my family, all of whom were rebuilding their lives after their respective disasters, all of whom had been humbled by discovering that their assumptions about success and failure were more complicated than they'd believed. "I appreciate the apologies," I said, "but I want you to understand something important. The work I do isn't valuable because it controls a lot of money. It's valuable because it helps people create better lives for themselves and their communities. The money is just a tool." Marcus set down his fork. "What do you mean? You all thought charitable work was meaningless because you focused on the volunteering aspect rather than the impact. But the homeless veteran who got stable housing through our program doesn't care whether I'm paid or unpaid for coordinating his assistance. The single mother who completed job training and found steady employment doesn't care about my salary. The small business owner who received microcredit funding to expand their operation doesn't care about my title." I paused to let that sink in before continuing. "The Foundation's resources are significant, but they're only meaningful when they're deployed effectively to create lasting change. That requires understanding complex social problems, building partnerships with other organizations, measuring program outcomes, and constantly adapting our approaches based on evidence of what actually works." Jennifer looked thoughtful. "So when we said your volunteer work wasn't a real career, you were dismissing an entire field of professional expertise. Social work, nonprofit management, program evaluation, grant writing, community development. These are specialized skills that require years of training and experience to do well." David, who had been working in the field for 3 months now, nodded vigorously. "The program coordinators I work with have master's degrees in social work, nonprofit management, public administration. It's not just good intentions and volunteer energy." "Exactly. And more importantly, it's not about the money or the titles or the recognition. It's about whether you're actually helping people solve problems and build better lives." Dad looked around the table. "So when we said family comes first, you were asking me to prioritize your immediate wants over other people's fundamental needs. Marcus needed business funding, but the families in our housing program needed shelter. Jennifer wanted wedding money, but the students in our scholarship program needed education. Those weren't equivalent priorities." Mom spoke quietly. We thought we were more important because we're family. You are important because you're family. That's why I connected each of you with programs that could provide genuine help rebuilding your situations. But being family doesn't entitle you to foundation resources that are designated for charitable purposes. The conversation continued through dinner and beyond, with my family asking detailed questions about the foundation's work for the first time in 15 years. They wanted to understand the programs they'd dismissed, the impact they'd never inquired about, the expertise they'd never acknowledged. By the end of the evening, something had fundamentally shifted in our relationships. My family finally understood that I hadn't been wasting time helping strangers instead of helping them. I had been building systems that could help thousands of people, including them when they eventually needed it, but only through programs designed to create lasting change rather than temporary rescue. The strangers I helped weren't really strangers at all. They were community members whose success strengthened the entire social fabric that supported all of us. My family had just never understood that until they became part of that community themselves. People who needed assistance, resources, and support to rebuild their lives. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how the crisis had revealed something important about both charity and family. True generosity isn't about rescuing people from the consequences of their choices. It's about creating systems that help people build sustainable, dignified lives for themselves. My family had learned that the hard way, but they had learned it. And in the process, they discovered that the daughter they dismissed as a bleeding heart failure had actually been building exactly the kind of safety net they needed when their own success stories collapsed. The Foundation's mission remained the same: serving underserved populations and creating lasting community impact. But now my family understood that they had always been part of that community, whether they realized it or not. And sometimes, the most important strangers you help are the people closest to you, who just needed to become strangers to their assumptions about how the world really works.